Talk about ambassadors right here. We've got a great one. And Nancy, I would love for you just to tell us your story.
Sure. So we live in suburban Boston. My husband and I, college sweethearts. We got married. We had 3 kids, very active kids. Usually, we were off to Pop Warner games on all-day Saturdays and hockey games at 4 o'clock in the morning, and really raised 3 wonderful kids, educated all 3 of them. The last one went to college and graduated, and they all moved out. Pretty typical story. One lived in Manhattan, one lived in Charlestown, and one lived in South Boston, which are the 2 hot places after you graduate school up at BC, up in Boston. And my husband and I were working towards retirement. We saw Florida in our future.
Somewhere warm.
Somewhere
you could come
warm.
to Atlanta.
Yeah, we'd come to Atlanta too.
Yeah.
Our middle child, Peter, has always been kind of that kid. He grew up being very much exhibiting leadership skills from a very, very early age, and also athletic skills. He was the kid that the other moms wanted their kid to rub up against. He was the kid that was elected president of the class. He became a Division I athlete and was the captain of the team. He was very inspirational his whole life. He understood what team meant, everybody working together towards a common goal. He knew how to face challenges with positivity and real passion. So Pete played Division I baseball, did not get drafted, unfortunately, and went over to Europe, played professionally in Europe, came home, and started his career. He also played baseball still at night in a very high-level baseball league and got hit in the wrist in one game in August of 2011. And Pete was the type of kid that things would bounce back rather quickly. Didn't bounce back. During this time, he was selling group insurance. And we were trying to figure out what was going on with the wrist, and he was working in his job. And one day, he and I were sitting around having a beer together, and he looked at me and he said, "Mom, I'm not sure this is what I'm supposed to do." He said, "I know that I went and I got this education, I've got this business degree, and I'm working at this great job, but I just don't feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing." And I think back to that conversation a lot because 3 months later, we were pulled into a doctor for a diagnosis because the wrist wasn't healing. And he told us that Pete, at 27 years old, had ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. And that started, it's very much a cliche, but that started our journey. Pete, when we were told, as you can well imagine, being a parent, we thought there was something wrong with his wrist. And we were told that. Then, of course, it was like, okay, all right, this is what we've been handed. Now, what do we do? Tell us what we do. And instead of telling us to go to a pharmacy and pick up medication, we were told to drive to GNC and buy zinc and copper. And, we'll see you in 3 months. And as a parent, I looked at the doctor and I said, wait a minute. I mean, I knew ALS was bad, but I was guilty as anyone. I didn't understand the real reality. The reality being that in 75 years since Lou Gehrig, nothing had been done as far as treatment and a cure for this disease. The needle had been moved very little. So the most empowering thing that happened that day was 6 hours later, my daughter and my son-in-law were home from Manhattan. My younger son was home from Charlestown. My son went, picked up his girlfriend, and we were all sitting around the kitchen table. And of course, we're all in a trance because of what we had just been told. So Pete, being the leader that he was, looked right at us and said, "Okay, people," literally, this is what he did. He went, "Okay, people, there'll be no wallowing." He goes, "What an opportunity we've been given to change people's lives." And I thought to myself, my life has just changed about 6 hours ago, Pete. I don't know how we're gonna, blow this up. And then he set the vision, and he said, "We are going to raise awareness and raise funds because I've been on the internet the last 6 hours. This disease is misunderstood and underfunded, and we're going to change that."
In 6 hours.
6 hours before, at 27, he was told he had 3 to 5 years to live. So as a leader does, he set the vision, and then we led. He led. He said, "We will not look back. We will not ask why. This is what we've been handed." And within a week, he came to me and he said, "Mom, this is my new team. This is my passion, and this is my mission. We are going to change the face of this disease."
So how did y'all come up with the Ice Bucket Challenge?
So the Ice Bucket Challenge is not an overnight sensation. What happened after that evening was Team Freight Train started to form. We realized that we weren't going to be alone in this journey, that people, the kindness of people and the goodness of people came out. And before we knew it, one brother-in-law became the webmaster. Another brother-in-law became the accountant. My sister became the event organizer.
And your children, your other kids.
And my other kids
just
never
quit.
left,
They
quit
never-
their jobs. My daughter left her job at Goldman Sachs and came home, and her husband commuted to New York for his job, so they could live 2 miles away. My younger son quit his job right on the spot and became Pete's full-time caregiver. So we went from empty nesters with 3 kids out being productive to everybody living back at home. And as I said, we moved in a posse. And we went everywhere together. But even more so, Team Freight Train started to take shape. And what it was is that this kid who had lived his life without fleeting friendships, he was always a good, kind person, no matter that he was the captain of the team. Kindness is one of those things, when you throw it out, you never know when it's going to come back to you. Well, all that kindness that Pete had harnessed in 27 years, and I do believe for our extended family, how we had lived our lives, all came back to us 100-fold, because everybody was lining up by our side and said, what are we doing, Pete? And Pete said, "We're going to go after this thing." So for 2.5 years, we built this huge support system. And up in the Boston area, Pete became, very much the forefront.
And at Fenway Park, right?
So because he was a high-level athlete, he had friends that were in the professional ranks that all came to his aid. So we, for the past 2.5 years, have cultivated this Team Freight Train, which we had 3,500 page likes on July 27th this year. So prior to the Ice Bucket Challenge, we had that vision. We knew. And we had educated ourselves to what was going on in this disease. And that's why it's so appropriate for me to be here. When Russ was explaining to me that this was, looking towards collaboration, I'm not a physician. I'm not in the medical community. I'm from the business world. And when Pete was diagnosed, the first thing we thought of, my husband and I looked at each other and we said, well, we're going to go back to medical school. If they can't figure it out, we are. We're parents. We're going to go back and we're going to figure this out. And then we realized we didn't have the time. So what could we do? We could educate ourselves and we could create awareness. We could network and we could get people to move all together in the right direction. One of the things that I learned very early on in the ALS community was the silos. There were a lot of silos in this community, and I made a name for myself right away. 3 months into the disease, I went to an ALS summit, and there was a panel going on, and just like today, most of what you all have been talking about has kind of gone right over my head. But the one thing I did notice was that the pharma company and the researchers and the clinicians that were on the panel were all kind of using language like, well, I do this, and I do that. And then they'd turn to each other and they'd say, oh, that's a really good idea. And I was watching body language. So Pete had given an impassioned speech to open the conference. And then after the panel, they asked for a Q&A, and I put my hand up. And I stood up and I said, hi, my name's Nancy Frates. I'm Pete's mom. And everybody kind of turned and looked at me. And I said, you know, I really respect everything that you're doing because ALS is not an easy disease to work in. I said, and I respect all of you bringing your knowledge to the table. But in business, when we have a collaboration, we have action items. We have goals set. We have a flip chart that has everything on there for follow-up. I said, I don't see that. I want to know what's going to happen after you leave this room. And just like this, it was dead silence. And I realized I had talked about the elephant in the room. And that was my indoctrination into this world. So we have been on that path too, is cultivating relationships with all the different entities in ALS.
And I'm bad about running over
Oh, sure,
time.
sure. So let's get to the
So
ice
how
bucket.
much money have you all been able to raise through the Ice Bucket Challenge?
So let's talk numbers. So it happened with Pete's Network. So that's my bottom line, is that the catalyst for this was Pete's Network. I do believe that, and I was thinking about this panel that was sitting up here prior to my coming out here, and talking about bringing the grandmothers in. That's what you have to do. We have made our way into boardrooms. We've made our way into labs. We're talking to the people that are fighting the fight, and we're having Pete come to them and saying, okay, what are we going to do? He's bringing passion and he's bringing energy. And I think those are the two things that the Ice Bucket Challenge was stimulated by. So you want to talk numbers? Well, let's talk numbers. We started on July 29th is when Team Freight Train got the first Ice Bucket Challenge. Since that day, ALS Association, which is the National Association for ALS, which is one organization, to date has raised $125 million.
Wow, that's fabulous.
What's even more empowering is they have 2.5 new donors, 2.5 million in 4 weeks. New people that have written a check to ALS. 50% of those people checked the box off that said they want to stay and stay current with ALS. Another really interesting statistic is 55% of those new donors are between the ages of 18 and 30. And that's good news for everybody in any disease, because that has stimulated a new generation to philanthropic causes. They might have only written a $10 check this time, but they wrote a check. I don't even think they knew what a checkbook was, but they did. I think it must have been the online donation piece. Right now, 150 different countries have posted Ice Bucket Challenge videos.
Wow.
In the last week, I have given interviews to Brazil, Australia, Japan, Ireland, and just 3 days ago, I did the BBC. This is now global.
And Pete can no longer talk.
Right, that's why his mom's out here.
Yeah.
And he also has a new baby.
Yes, he just
So,
became a father on August 31st.
So that's probably the exclamation point to this whole thing, is Pete's wife. Pete's wife was his girlfriend on the day of diagnosis. She moved in that night, and that just speaks volumes to the support. They got engaged, they got married last year, and little Lucy was due on September 10th. Lucy decided to come 2 weeks early and was born on August 31st, 2014. So
She made the ice, but did y'all put water on her?
yeah, well, we're about to do that. But she, you know, we feel that we've been guided by this, and I think for her to come on the last day of August 2014 is very fitting, because we've been told by a number of people in ALS that if the cure comes in 20 days or if it comes in 20 years, it will go back to August of 2014 as the tipping point of coming to a cure for ALS.
So we have just seen
The
what
power.
one family, what one leader at 27 was able to do, and then how he brought in his whole family and his support network. And $125 million later,
$125 million to an organization whose annual budget is $23 million.
wow. So let's give her a great hand of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.